Is Jimmy coming?
I think Janine will not be here today, and I think Scott.
Scott said he wasn't gonna be.
Florida, I think.
I was just saying.
But is Jimmy?
And I'm not sure about it.
We're at a quorum.
Yeah, right. My wife loved your skeleton. She had to show me the other day and stop in front of your house. So if you wonder who the stalkers are in the blue.
I was like stuck in the snow in Allen's Park all weekend,
Oh,
so
okay.
in the dark.
Okay.
That sounds fun though.
Actually, we had a great time. We had a great time.
And what was the event?
It's an Outlander retreat, for the series
Oh,
Outlander.
yeah, very cool.
So every year we pick one book, and that's the book we focus on, and we do like a lot of book club discussions and a lot of eating from
That menu that they
like
serve,
the
yeah.
stuff that they served. And
How was that?
Okay, so we had like 3 ladies that cook.
Was it good?
They're such good cooks. Like that's the best. Like
They
you
made
go-
haggis taste good?
We did not. No. We,
I don't think anybody can do that.
That's like.
no, they don't make haggis for that very
Thank God,
reason.
yeah.
No, just like we had a Scottish breakfast, which was scrambled eggs with fresh herbs and like mushrooms and like
Hey, Brian, I didn't see you sitting there. How are you? Good.
Nice, nice.
just and like grits and porridge and
Do you guys all like just chip in and everybody's, or is it like a cost for me?
you pay for the whole thing, but for the like basically what you're paying for is the lodge for Friday, Saturday, Sunday through Monday, so 4 days, 3 nights and 4 days.
Yeah, I would like to thank everybody for coming to the work session for City of Idaho Springs, April 29th, 2024. And we'll kick it off right at 6 o'clock. I am expecting that Janine will not be able to be here tonight, and that Scott also will not be able to be here tonight. We have 2 things on the work session, both very important. And we've got the first item as the 4 Points residential deed restrictions. And Jonathan, would you like to kick that off, or do you?
Sure. And Brian, do you want to come up and talk with us too, maybe?
Sure.
Mayor and council, the last time we talked about 4 Points, you gave us direction to see if we could reach an agreement about purchasing deed restrictions at that site. Some of the background is that they've just, in this funding environment, they needed a little bit of assistance to make sure the project remains viable and successful. And we have some money available through ARPA dollars that we could use to contribute. We also talked to the county, and the county BOCC has also agreed to contribute ARPA dollars to this project because they recognize the importance of having affordable housing within our community and how important it is not only to Idaho Springs, but to our entire region. And so with that kind of funding available, $500,000 from the county, $400,000 that was directed by council at our last meeting, and potentially the delay of tap fees of about $560,000, that takes us right up to 1.4 million or so. So with that number in mind, we talked to the 4 Point staff and we came to a provisional agreement to deed restrict in perpetuity 50 units at 4 Points, which is nearly half of the units at that facility, using a pretty innovative strategy that would set the average AMI at these properties, which is area median income, at 100%. And what that does is by averaging the income at 100, that means that they can take somebody who makes 40% AMI, and in return, what they can do is on the other end, they can take somebody who makes like 140% AMI. And that doesn't mean that they're going to have units that are, way over market rate. It just means that they could in order to average to 100. And so what this does is it takes what was going to be a market rate housing development only, and it puts real affordable housing that will be there forever for our community at a range of or a continuum of pricing for us. So that means like you're going to be seeing like a studio apartment for under $1,000 a month, maybe potentially less depending on the AMI. You also might see a 2-bedroom in the $1,800, $1,900 range, which is a pretty good deal, or less potentially, and so on and so forth. It just kind of depends on how that averaging works. I detailed a little bit about how averaging works in my staff report, but generally speaking, that's how it is. You can kind of see how that would be, but I'm happy to answer questions about that. The other thing that we agreed upon that was, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. How are we averaging the AMI? Because we've talked about this before, how when you look at like how HUD averages AMI, they use Denver, Arapahoe, and Adams. That's not realistic for Idaho Springs, I don't believe.
Well, there's no data that's just otherwise right now. And so that's why we use this averaging strategy. What happens is there's American census data, right, that comes out annually. And what they do is they look at the AMIs of a given area. And it is a fact that we're in the Denver, Lakewood, Aurora statistical area. So if you look at what our AMI is, you're going to see a range somewhere between $67,000 and $81,000, depending on how that's calculated. We know that we do have a significant population that makes less than that, and that's why we want to use an averaging strategy, because it lets us go into those lower AMIs. This being a market rate housing development, it's not getting subsidized by other sources of funding, which makes it difficult for us to demand like across the board lower AMIs, because the project has to remain market viable. And if we go too low, it won't be able to do that. But using this strategy, we know that out of that 50 units, probably 25 of them are going to be under 100% AMI, or potentially we'll have all at 100, which is not a terrible rental in Idaho Springs. So that was one of the reasons we thought maybe this might be a good strategy to bring forward for consideration.
Also, though, market rate developments don't usually get the kind of funding that the county and the city is giving them.
But that's why we're getting these deed restrictions in perpetuity. So it's just not like there's like a, it's not getting tax credits or something like that, another strategy to subsidize development. We're doing it all in-house with our own funding. So of course we could always do something different, but this strategy would ensure their viability while still maintaining a significant number of units, like in a very good income range. Originally, when we were first talking about this, we were talking about getting 18 units restricted, and now we're talking about 50. So even if it was only 25 that were less than 100, we're still like significantly more than we originally thought we would get. And so I think that's a council point of discussion, whether you feel comfortable with that strategy. The other thing we did do is we also put a focus on local and public service employees, meaning teachers, police officers, county employees, city employees, people who serve our community, to have a preference in these units.
How do you do that?
There's a number of strategies you can use. I think one of the ways that it's done is to write a first refusal. So they would have to advertise it to the different agencies that would be eligible first. And if nobody takes it, like for instance, on the school district deal, what happens is they're offered to teachers. If teachers don't take them, I think within 14 days, then they're open to public service employees. And if they don't take it, then they can put them on the market. But I think what we would do is we'd say open first to those employees that we target, and then open to local community members, and then they could open it after that. And that's something we can manage through the deed restriction on it's through the warranty deed is what happens. So that way what we do is we kind of solve, we know teachers need more housing. They've got some units here as well, but they're going to need more housing. We know that we have a significant issue having people in public service positions finding housing in our community, and this would help kind of address that.
Will this also be available for just people that work downtown, servers?
Yeah, and that's
customer service people.
So in terms of financial structure and commitment, I kind of walked through this, but we have $400,000 that could be allocated. I do have a request for consideration here of considering allocating our entire $465,719.70 that we have in ARPA dollars. When we originally talked about this, we talked about committing the $65,000 remaining to another housing project that we have kind of anticipated. But the problem is that these funds need to be allocated by December 31st, 2024. And it's unlikely that that project is going to be ready to have those funds allocated by that date, in which case we basically are just going to lose the funding. We also have to spend it by December 31st, 2026, and that project would need to go through design and engineering before we'd be able to actually allocate the money, because it has to be used on the capital part of the project. So I just thought it might be worth considering, do we want to consider allocating that entire amount to this project? And that was one of the questions I had.
What other project could that money go to, out of curiosity?
There has been some talk about a senior housing project that could happen in the near future in the city. And I think we want to try to support that as much as possible, because it would be real low income senior housing. But I think, and this could be a discussion point too, I just don't think that we're going to be ready to allocate those funds by December 31st. I think it's probably like next year.
Say if we make that decision to utilize the entire 465, is there a way to stagger it and say, if this other senior housing project, because I feel pretty strongly about that, that it can go to them if we get it going by December 31st, and if not, or does it have to be
I
allocated
think
now?
it would need to be allocated now, so I think that should be a consideration for your discussion. The other question I had is related to the tap fees, and we've kind of done the math. There's always a little bit of math that goes into this, and there's always a little bit of, you have to kind of, as the development goes, the number might potentially change up or net down like a couple $1,000s, but there's approximately $567,000 in tap fees for this project. And what we've talked about is our council said that we would be maybe comfortable delaying those tap fees in return for some temporary deed restrictions at this site, when we last talked. And in the meantime, we've had some conversation about these units. The thing here is that there's probably a really strong enduring public benefit to having all of these units restricted forever. If we allow them to forgive the tap fees, it's likely going to be 18 units that we would lose, and that would be whenever the tap fees are paid. So one of the questions I had, and I'm just bringing this up for discussion, I understand the direction of council we've had in the past, and that development pays its own way. But there is a pretty significant benefit of having these units. Originally we were talking maybe 5 units, now we're talking 18, which is a pretty big number. It basically wipes out our affordable housing commitment for at least the next probably 5 to 10 years. And so what I just wanted to ask was, would council be consider just either waiving the tap fees or providing other funding similar as a one-time concession for this development, knowing that we're restricting a significant number of affordable housing units? And that's just a question. I don't have I just wanted to bring it up because I thought it was important to have in the conversation. Again, the county is also contributing $500,000 of their funding for this in support of this initiative. Also thinking about this like 50 number, and I think Brian can speak to that a little bit more, but this partnership is really this really is a significant project for the city if we're able to accomplish this level of deed restriction here. In terms of like just request for direction, all I have is finalization of the financial commitment, just confirm the allocation of ARPA dollars, $400,000, or if we're comfortable adding a little bit more to that, and how we want to handle the deferral of $567,000 in tap fees. The other question would be, if we don't want to completely put those tap fees into this project, we just need to think a little bit about how we would ask for those back and then when that would happen. The structure of the deed restrictions, how many we would allow to be retired upon payment of the tap fees, and if there's any other things that we want to build into the contract, the next step for this would be Carmen. And the next step of this would be we'd work with the county to draft an MOU so that we could do the money situation with the county. And then we'd continue working with county legal and our legal to build the deed restrictions for 4 points so that we could get them the funding. And I think that's pretty much all that we've got left to do. So I was just looking for direction on those 3 points, essentially.
And Jonathan, I just want to chime in. I know we did not reinvent the wheel on this. Denver recently secured 100% AMI permit for $30,000, and that per unit. So when you consider, it's almost impossible to build a unit for 300,000. To be able to permanently deed restrict for 30, I think accomplishes a pretty significant goal. I would lean myself towards the 50 just because I think even at 50, if we have, say half, break down into the 60 AMI, we can help a lot of our local folks.
So how is that determined? I mean, we've talked a little bit about, I know I've talked to you individually about how putting these deed restricted management of these into the multi-jurisdictional housing authority. Is that something that the housing authority would work with to determine?
Yeah, so likely what we would do is in the contract negotiation with 4 points, we would need to determine an annual baseline setting of the AMI number. And we could use any methodology we like. There's data that's called ACS data and survey data, and typically that's where they get their AMI number. But if we could come up with a reasonable method to modify that number to be more hyper-local than the whole Denver MSA, that would be on the table. We just need to come up with a methodology to do it.
I really, and I appreciate that you guys are willing to be very flexible. I think this is a very, it's an ongoing living thing that it keeps changing. My concern is that I know what we are, like, what is it, 40% of our population is below 50,000. I want that population who struggles so hard to find housing to have the opportunity to at least try to get housing. You know, and if we're gonna do these deed restrictions where we're giving quite a bit, I wanna make sure they have that opportunity. So all of these are not at 100 AMI. We have a significant number at 80 or less.
Right, and I think that's why we have this balance, because they may have people that get in there at 60. But then, you know, let's just say half are at 60 and half are at 140, which I'm not thrilled about. But it still averages 100, and we were able to get, in this mathematical example, at least half at the 60.
The other thing is,
And I'm sorry, Jonathan, just one more thing. I just also want to point out, it's unfortunate that even these 50 are nowhere near what we need. I mean, you know, we literally need hundreds of affordable units. So this, at least is a start, but we got a long way to go.
But it's actually not 50 if we're doing the average of 100. You know, we're talking about if we get 25 that are at 60, does that mean we have, you know, 25 that are 140 to make up that 100 average?
well, the thing to remember too is that just because they can go up to 140 doesn't necessarily mean the market will bear that. So we're thinking about like a pretty demand heavy market right now, but in the future, that may not always be the case. And so they may have to set their rates lower potentially, but we're still going to, like, it could even be better than that. But 100% AMI in the market that we have in Idaho Springs, fair market, if you look at like the fair market rents in Idaho Springs, we'd still be seeing a significant reduction in cost from what fair market rents are, which are like $2,400 for a 2-bedroom or like $1,200 for a studio. And I think we're going to be at 100% AMI, probably about $1,000 or $1,100 for a studio and $1,800 or $1,900 for a 2-bedroom. So based on like the market value of an apartment in Idaho Springs, this is still going to be at 100% AMI, we're still going to see a good price. And then that fair market value, which is something that changes over time, that's really a market demand, we should see that we pace to that in a way that keeps these units at least slightly more affordable, if not significantly more affordable. I think one of the other things is, like, in terms of a teacher, like we know that a teacher, maybe their take-home pay, like let's say 75% of it goes to rent right now. Well, they have the ability to work with that teacher now. So a teacher's probably a pretty good bet on a renter here. They might be willing to go down to 40% AMI on a teacher or somebody like these public service employees that we're talking about. And if they do that, all it really does is it means that a couple of those units, they could go a little bit higher on, which ultimately, even if we're at fair market rents, it's still going to be a good price unit. It's not going to get blown up
Is
super
it
high.
something that you're gonna hammer out in the warranty deed? Because you can say
Yes.
they may be, but like, these are not,
I'm with you.
these are
on
not
this.
shoulds or
Speculation
wills.
is-
These are may or might, you know.
It's very
they're not-
speculative.
Yes, it's speculative.
And hoping that, I mean, that all the players always remain true to what we're trying to do right now tonight. That's my concern. And I'm a little confused